7. Insurance claims, HOA, solar, and the documents sellers forget. The next morning, Sarah's phone rings. Jennifer sounds almost amused. You told me to start looking through our records, and I think I opened Pandora's box. Sarah laughs and asks what she found. Jennifer has located the invoice from the old roof repair, paperwork from the insurance claim, several HOA statements, a solar financing agreement, an old termite treatment warranty, and a folder from the kitchen remodel. What started as a simple request to gather a few documents has suddenly become a stack of paperwork sitting on the Reynolds kitchen table. That's actually good news. A listing agent would much rather discover these documents now than after the property is under contract. Disclosure isn't simply about asking the seller what they remember. Sometimes the documents remind the seller of things that haven't crossed their mind in years. The current Arizona Realtors listing agreement provides a useful example because its owner obligation provisions identify documents such as the SPDS, insurance claims history, HOA information, and solar documentation among information that may become relevant to the listing and sale. As we've discussed throughout this course, we're using these forms as examples and guides. Different brokerages and transactions may use different agreements and procedures. Jennifer starts with the insurance paperwork. I remembered the roof claim, but I forgot that there was also some drywall damage in the upstairs bedroom. That is exactly why documentation can matter. A seller may remember the main event, the roof leaked, while forgetting related repairs that occurred at the same time. Sarah isn't reviewing the claim so she can become an insurance adjuster. She is trying to understand the property's history well enough to recognize what information may need to be addressed. Here's where agents need to be careful about going too far in the other direction. Finding an old insurance claim does not automatically prove that a property has a current defect. Sarah should not tell a buyer there was an insurance claim, so obviously the roof is bad. But she also shouldn't tell the Reynolds insurance paid the claim, so we know everything was repaired perfectly. Neither conclusion is necessarily supported by the paperwork. Sarah can communicate known information and let qualified professionals address technical questions about current condition. Then Sarah picks up the HOA statements. Mike originally told her the dues were approximately $150 per month. The paperwork tells a more complicated story. There appears to be a neighborhood association and a master association. Jennifer looks at Sarah and says, I completely forgot about the master association because that one is billed differently. Imagine Sarah had simply entered HOA $150 per month into the MLS based on Mike's memory. A buyer might use that information when evaluating affordability. The buyer's lender might use HOA obligations when reviewing qualification. Later, additional association costs could surface. Now, a simple assumption at the listing appointment has become an inaccurate representation that has to be corrected. This is why experienced agents verify information that can reasonably be verified instead of treating the seller's memory as the final answer. The seller's memory is a starting point. Documentation helps you determine what question to ask next. Then, Sarah reaches the solar paperwork. Remember, Mike initially thought the panels were owned. Jennifer knew they were still making payments. Now they finally have the agreement in front of them, and it confirms there is an outstanding financing obligation. Mike looks surprised. I thought that loan stayed with the house. Sarah doesn't answer immediately. Good. Whether a particular solar obligation can be paid off, transferred, assumed, or otherwise handled depends on the actual agreement and transaction circumstances. Sarah should not invent an answer simply because she has seen solar on previous transactions. She can recognize that the agreement matters and help the Reynolds identify the appropriate people to contact for accurate information. Let's look at why this can become a major issue. Imagine Sarah enters own solar in the MLS because that's what Mike originally told her. A buyer writes an offer believing there is no solar debt. During escrow, the parties discover a $28,000 outstanding solar obligation. How do you think that conversation goes? The buyer says, you told us it was owned. The seller says, we thought it was. Here's where many advertising problems begin, not because an agent intentionally lied, but because the agent converted an assumption into a fact. That's why verification matters. Now, Jennifer hands Sarah another folder. Here's the paperwork from the kitchen remodel. Sarah looks through it and sees contractor invoices, appliance receipts, and design documents, but she doesn't immediately see permit information. Mike says, the contractor probably handled that. There's that word again, probably. Probably isn't the same thing as verified. Sarah doesn't need to become a building code expert. She also shouldn't advertise the home as having a fully permitted kitchen remodel unless there is a reasonable basis for making that representation. If permit status matters, the appropriate records or governmental source may need to be consulted. The termite paperwork creates another good example. Jennifer says, great, this proves we don't have termites. Not exactly. It may establish information about previous treatment or warranty coverage. It doesn't necessarily allow Sarah to guarantee the property's current pest condition. Again, the document tells Sarah what happened. An appropriate professional may be needed to determine what is happening now. By the time they finish, the kitchen table contains insurance records, HOA statements, solar financing documents, roof invoices, termite paperwork, and remodeling records. None of those documents automatically creates a problem. In fact, they may prevent problems because Sarah and the Reynolds now have better information. This is something I want you to remember when working with sellers. Collecting documents isn't the same thing as interpreting everything in them. A real estate licensee can recognize that a solar agreement may affect the transaction without giving legal advice about the contract. The agent can identify an insurance claim without determining the technical condition of the repaired area. The agent can recognize HOA information without giving legal conclusions about association enforcement. The agent can identify a possible lien without deciding whether the lien is legally valid. Know where your job stops and another professional's job begins. Sarah gathers her notes and tells the Reynolds, "This is exactly why I wanted this information before we started making claims about the property." Jennifer nods. "So now you can put everything in the MLS?" Sarah smiles. "Now I can start making sure that what we put in the MLS is accurate." That's an important distinction. Having information doesn't automatically mean every piece of information belongs in the public remarks. It means Sarah is in a better position to accurately market the property, complete the listing process, address disclosure obligations, and avoid unsupported claims. Because the next risk in this transaction isn't hidden in a folder on the Reynolds kitchen table. It's what Sarah is about to tell the public about the property. And that takes us into Section 7, MLS remarks, advertising, and the danger of saying too much. Online discussion 1. Sarah discovers that Mike and Jennifer belong to 2 HOA associations, even though Mike originally remembered only one. Why is this significant? Answer. The additional association may affect the property's costs and other transaction information. Sarah should avoid relying solely on the seller's memory when more reliable documentation is available. Identifying the additional association before marketing gives the parties an opportunity to obtain accurate information and reduces the risk that a buyer relies on incomplete HOA information. 2. The solar documents show an outstanding loan even though Mike initially told Sarah that the solar system was owned. What should Sarah do? Answer. Sarah should work from the more reliable information and avoid representing the solar system as owned free of an obligation. She should help the sellers identify what additional information is needed regarding the loan and involve the appropriate lender, solar provider, title professional, broker, or other professional as necessary. Sarah should not assume how the obligation will be handled based solely on previous transactions. 3. Why doesn't an old insurance claim automatically prove either that a property currently has a defect or that the previous condition was completely resolved? Answer. An insurance claim provides information about a previous event and may provide documentation concerning repairs, but it does not necessarily establish the property's present physical condition. The agent should accurately communicate known information without making unsupported technical conclusions. When current condition matters, an appropriately qualified professional should make that evaluation.